I never thought I would live to see the day when my own flesh and blood, my daughter, would slam a door in my face and lock me out of her home. It was a cold autumn evening, the kind where the air carries the sharp scent of drying leaves and the bite of an early frost. I had walked the short path up to her porch with the hope of a warm dinner and maybe a little time with my granddaughter, Lily. I held a pie I had baked earlier that afternoon, balancing it carefully in my shaky hands, imagining how her little eyes would light up when she saw it. But instead of joy, I was met with a voice laced with irritation and impatience. "Mum, you can't just keep showing up uninvited," Emily snapped, standing in the doorway with her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her husband, Jason, hovered in the background. He didn't say much, but I could feel his presence pressing against me like a wall. I blinked, startled. Uninvited? "Emily, I'm your mother. Do I really need an invitation to visit my own daughter? My own granddaughter?" Emily's eyes narrowed. She looked like she had been waiting for me to say exactly that. "Yes, you do. This is my house now. My family. You can't just barge in whenever you feel like it." Her words sliced into me like cold steel. I tightened my grip on the pie dish, my hands trembling. "I wasn't barging in, sweetheart. I just thought." My voice cracked, and I tried again. "I thought you'd want to see me." "I haven't seen Lily in days." Jason stepped forward then, his expression grim but smug. "Emily's right, Margaret. You should have called first. You can't just walk in like this. It makes things uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. The word echoed in my chest like an insult. I felt heat rise in my face. I had raised Emily alone after her father passed. I worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, to put her through school, to give her a life she could be proud of. And now, standing on her porch with the weight of years pressing on my back, I was suddenly an outsider. I tried to push past the lump forming in my throat. "Jason, I'm not a stranger. I'm her mother. I'm Lily's grandmother. What's so uncomfortable about me being here?" Emily sighed loudly, like she was dealing with a child throwing a tantrum. "Mum, please. We've talked about boundaries. You can't just drop by. Lily has a routine, and you disrupt it. She glanced at Jason, then back at me. "You make things harder than they need to be." My heart pounded, each word landing like a hammer. I looked at her face, searching for some softness, some reminder of the little girl who used to cling to my skirts and cry if I left the room. But she was gone. In her place stood a woman, hardened by distance and, perhaps, Jason's influence. "Emily," I whispered, "I'm your mother. Don't do this to me." But before I could say another word, she shut the door. I heard the lock click. The sound was louder than thunder in my ears. My knees wobbled, and for a moment I thought I might collapse right there on the porch. The pie dish slipped slightly in my hands, and I barely managed to steady it. Inside, I heard muffled voices, Emily and Jason talking, maybe arguing, but their words were indistinct, swallowed by the heavy silence pressing down on me. I stood there for what felt like hours, though it could not have been more than a minute. My breath clouded in the cold air. My eyes stung, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not there, not where they could see me through the curtains. Finally, I turned and walked down the steps. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the world itself was trying to pin me down. As I reached the gate, I remembered another time, years ago, when Emily was just a child. She had been locked out of the school gym because she had forgotten her shoes. She had run into my arms sobbing. "Mummy, they wouldn't let me in." I had held her, stroked her hair, and promised, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll never let anyone shut you out. And yet, here I was, the roles reversed. My daughter had locked me out, and I was powerless. I carried the pie back to my small car, the weight of it now unbearable. I set it on the passenger seat and sat there, staring at the steering wheel, my chest aching. For the first time in my life, I felt truly unwanted. When I finally drove back home, if you could call the cramped little apartment I now lived in a home, I set the untouched pie on the counter and sat down heavily at the kitchen table. The silence of the room wrapped around me like a shroud. I thought of Lily, sweet Lily, with her curly hair and curious eyes. I wondered if she had asked about me. Did she miss her grandmother? Or had Emily already started painting me as some nuisance in her little mind? The thought made my stomach twist. The next morning, I called Emily. She didn't answer. I tried again in the afternoon, and finally she picked up. Her tone was clipped. "Mom, I told you, stop coming over unannounced." I swallowed hard. "Emily, please. I only wanted to see Lily. I miss her. You'll see her on holidays," she said firmly. "But you need to respect our space. Jason and I need to focus on our life, our family. You're just too much sometimes. Too much. That broke me more than anything. I'm too much for you now?" My voice cracked, trembling with disbelief. "Emily, I gave everything for you. I sacrificed my youth, my health, my happiness, so you could have a future. And now you're telling me I'm too much?" On the other end, there was silence. Then Emily's voice, softer, but unyielding. "Mom, I didn't ask for that. I didn't ask you to give up your life. Please, just stop making me feel guilty." The line went dead. She had hung up. I sat in the silence again, but this time, a different feeling crept into my chest. Not just sorrow, but something sharper. Resolve. Emily didn't know everything. She didn't know what I had written in my will. I had never told her, never told Jason, never told anyone. It was my one secret, my last safeguard against the cruel reality I now faced. As I sat there, staring at the pie still untouched on the counter, I whispered to myself, "One day, Emily, one day you'll see. You think you've shut me out, but you don't know the whole story." And for the first time since she locked me out, I allowed myself a small bitter smile. Because the truth was, my daughter had no idea that the key to her future wasn't in her house. It was in my will. When I returned to my empty apartment that night, I sat by the window with a cup of cold tea and stared out at the dark street. My daughter's voice echoed in my ears. "You're too much. This is my family now. You can't just drop by." Those words didn't just sting, they cut deeper than any knife. But the truth is, this wasn't the first time Emily had turned her back on me. No, this was years in the making. And if I'm honest, maybe I should have seen it coming. I grew up poor, dirt poor. My parents, God rest their souls, worked themselves into the ground just to keep the lights on. When I was 18, I married Thomas, my high school sweetheart. He was tall, strong, with hands that could build anything but pockets that were always empty. Life wasn't easy. Thomas worked at the factory, and I took in sewing jobs from the neighbors. We lived in a tiny 2-bedroom house with paint peeling from the walls and pipes that froze every winter. But we had love, and for me, that was enough. Then came Emily, my miracle baby. I remember the night she was born. Storm raging outside, power flickering, me clutching Thomas's hand as the doctor said, "It's a girl." I swore then and there that I would give her a better life than I ever had. But fate had other plans. When Emily was 10, Thomas collapsed on the factory floor. A heart attack, sudden and merciless. One moment he was here, the next he was gone. And just like that, I was alone. I had to become both mother and father overnight. I took on every job I could, cleaning houses during the day, waitressing at night, and still doing sewing whenever I had a spare moment. My hands bled from the endless work, but I pushed through because Emily needed shoes, books, food, and most of all, stability. But children don't always understand sacrifice. At first, Emily adored me. She'd sit beside me while I sewed, chattering about school, her little hands trying to stitch crooked lines. But as she grew older, things shifted. In high school, she started pulling away. Suddenly, I was embarrassing. My clothes were too plain, my accent too thick, my hands too rough. She didn't invite friends over anymore. Once, I overheard her telling a girl at school, "That's not my mom, that's just Margaret." It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I told myself it was just teenage rebellion, that she'd grow out of it. But instead, she grew colder. When she graduated, I cheered the loudest in the auditorium, tears streaming down my face. She barely looked at me as she took her diploma. Later, she asked me not to come to the after party. "It's just for friends, Mom." You wouldn't fit in, those words still echo. And then came Jason. She met him in college. He was smooth-talking, well-dressed, and came from a wealthier family. From the very beginning, I didn't trust him. There was something in his eyes, calculating, always watching. When he shook my hand the first time, I noticed how he glanced around my tiny apartment with thinly veiled disdain. He made a joke about the peeling wallpaper, and Emily laughed along with him. That was the moment I knew Jason was going to be trouble. I tried to warn her. "Emily," I said one night, "be careful with him. He doesn't look at you with love. He looks at you like you're a project." She snapped back instantly. "You just don't want me to be happy. You want me to stay small, poor, stuck in your little world. But I'm better than that, Mom. I'm not going to end up like you, better than me." Those 3 words burned into my memory. She married Jason 2 years later. I was invited but barely tolerated. His family sat in the front row, perfectly groomed and polished, while I sat in the back with my second-hand dress and trembling hands. During the reception, I caught Jason's mother whispering to another guest, "She doesn't belong here." And she was right. I didn't. After the wedding, things grew worse. Emily stopped calling as often. When she did, it was usually to ask for something: money, babysitting, favors. I gave what I could, even when it hurt. Then Jason started making comments, subtle at first. "You know, Margaret, maybe you should sell that old sewing machine. It's outdated." Or, "Why don't you downsize? You don't need that much space at your age." At the time, I brushed it off. But later, I realized he wasn't just making casual suggestions. He was planting seeds of manipulation. Because the truth is, I wasn't poor anymore. After Thomas died, I worked myself to the bone. But all those years of sewing, cleaning, and saving pennies, they added up. Slowly but surely, I built a little nest egg. And when my parents passed, they left me the family land. At the time, it wasn't worth much, just a stretch of forested property on the outskirts of town. But then, the developers came, and suddenly, that land was worth a fortune. I never told Emily how much money I really had. She assumed I was barely scraping by, and I let her believe it. Because deep down, I wanted to see her true nature. And I did. The way she treated me, the way Jason eyed my possessions, it told me everything I needed to know. But not everyone in my life was cruel. There was Ruth, my neighbor. She was a widow like me, with silver hair and a warm laugh that filled the room. She'd bring me casseroles when I was too tired to cook, and she always asked about Emily with genuine concern. "Don't give up on her, Margaret," Ruth would say. "Sometimes kids lose their way, but they come back around." And then there was Michael, my lawyer, a quiet, serious man who had handled my affairs for years. He knew the truth about my finances, and he helped me draft the will. "Are you sure you want to keep this a secret from your daughter?" he asked once. "Yes," I said firmly. "I need to know who she really is before I decide anything." Michael nodded, though I saw the hesitation in his eyes, which brings me back to that night on the porch, pie dish trembling in my hands. Emily thought she was pushing away a weak, helpless old woman. Jason thought I was just some burden they had to tolerate until I died, but neither of them knew the truth. Neither of them knew about the land, about the investments, about the will I had carefully written with Michael. And here's the part that made me shiver. Even in the safety of my little apartment, I hadn't left everything to Emily. I had made a choice years ago, one that would change everything when the time came. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table with the untouched pie still on the counter, I pulled open the drawer beside me. Inside was the envelope, thick, sealed, and heavy with the weight of secrets. I ran my fingers over it, whispering to myself, if she only knew. And as I held that envelope, I thought of Lily, innocent, sweet Lily, who might one day discover that her grandmother's will wasn't what her parents expected. Because the truth is, Emily wasn't the one inheriting everything. My daughter had no idea who the real heir was, and when she finally found out, it would shatter her world. The morning sun streamed into my tiny apartment, but it brought no warmth. My hands trembled as I held the sealed envelope again. Every letter inside that will carry the power to expose who my daughter truly was, and what she didn't know could destroy her. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And that day, they began to rise. It started with a phone call. "Mom." Emily's voice was sharper than usual. "We're having Lily's birthday party this weekend. Jason thought it would be good to invite you, but please don't embarrass us." I wanted to laugh, but I kept my voice steady. "Of course, dear. I wouldn't miss it for the world." When I hung up, my chest tightened. I knew why Jason had suddenly thought it would be good to include me. Money. Somehow, they had sniffed around my finances, and they were about to learn that I wasn't the helpless woman they believed. The house gleamed like something out of a magazine. Balloons floated across the ceiling, a table groaned under platters of food, and Lily twirled in a pink dress, blissfully unaware of the tension simmering around her. "Margaret," Jason greeted me at the door, his smile too wide, his eyes too sharp. "So glad you could make it. Emily said you've been keeping busy." "Yes," I replied evenly. "Quite busy." Inside, Emily barely looked at me. She fluttered around, laughing loudly with her friends, making sure to keep her distance. It was as though I were a stranger in her home, until Jason tapped a glass for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jason announced, "before we cut the cake, I think it's important we talk about family. After all, family is everything I froze." His voice wasn't warm. It was calculated. This wasn't about Lily's birthday. It was about me. Jason's eyes scanned the room before landing on me. "Margaret, we've all been worried about you. Alone in that old apartment, barely getting by. Don't you think it's time to make arrangements?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt every eye on me. "Arrangements?" I asked calmly. Jason smirked. "Well, you're not getting any younger. Wouldn't it make sense to secure your future, and of course, Emily and Lily's future, perhaps by putting your affairs in order?" Emily stepped forward, trying to soften his words but failing. Mom, what Jason means is, we want to help. You don't have to hold on to everything. You could move in with us. If you just, made things official. Official. My will. They wanted me to sign everything over. I set down my teacup with deliberate care. The room was silent. Even Lily, sensing something heavy, clung to a balloon in the corner. You think I've been living hand to mouth all these years, I said slowly, scanning the faces before me. But you're wrong. Jason blinked. What are you talking about? I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document. Not the will itself, but a property deed. Gasps echoed as I held it up. This, I announced, is the deed to the land my parents left me. Land that was once worthless. But now, developers paid millions for it. Emily's face went pale. Jason's jaw tightened. You're lying, he spat. I smiled thinly. Am I? Michael, my lawyer, can confirm everything. Every penny has been invested carefully. I'm not broke. I'm not helpless. And I'm certainly not at your mercy. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered. Others just stared. Emily's mask cracked. You mean, all this time you had money? And you let me believe you were poor? Why would you do that? Because, I said firmly, I needed to see your heart, and now I have. You pushed me away, humiliated me, locked me out of your home, while all you could think about was what I could give you. Her lip trembled. That's not true. Isn't it? I demanded. My voice rose, echoing off the walls. When your father died, I bled for you. I worked until my fingers cracked, until my body gave out, so you could have a better life. And this is how you repay me, by treating me as a burden. Gasps filled the room. Emily's friends stared at her in shock. Jason stepped in, his mask slipping. Listen, Margaret, you're being dramatic. Emily just wants what's best. Surely you don't expect us to believe you'd leave all that money to someone else. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. I don't expect you to believe anything, but you should be careful what you assume. He scoffed, but there was fear in his eyes now, because he knew I had the power to cut them off completely. Emily shouted, You can't do this to me, Mom. I'm your daughter. I stood tall, my voice steady but sharp. A daughter loves, respects, and honors her mother. You are not acting like a daughter. You are acting like a vulture circling its prey. The room gasped audibly. One woman covered her mouth. Someone muttered, She's right. Jason's face turned red. You think you can shame us in front of everyone? You're old, Margaret. Weak. You won't live forever, and when you're gone, everything will belong to us anyway. A hush fell. Every guest was frozen. Even Emily looked horrified by his bluntness, but I only smiled, slow and cold. Will it? I whispered. I pulled another envelope from my purse, thicker, sealed with Michael's wax stamp. This, I said, holding it high, is my will. And it does not leave everything to Emily. Not even close. Emily staggered back. What? Gasps filled the air again. Jason snarled, You wouldn't dare. Oh, I dared, I said with a grim smile. Because unlike you, Jason, I think about who truly deserves my legacy, who truly loves me. And it isn't you. Emily lunged toward me, eyes wild. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't. But I cut her off, my voice ringing like a bell. You locked me out, Emily. But you never knew what I was keeping locked away. The room erupted, voices clashing, gasps, whispers, the sound of chaos. And as Emily fell to her knees, sobbing, Jason seething beside her, I turned and walked out, clutching the envelope. Because soon, They would learn exactly who was written in my will, and it would destroy them. The party had dissolved into chaos when I walked out with the envelope in my hand. But silence has a way of creeping back in, heavier than any noise. That silence broke a week later in the county courthouse. Word had spread, neighbors whispered, friends speculated, and Emily's social circle buzzed with scandal. The woman who seemed to have it all was now being whispered about as the daughter who locked her own mother out and clawed at her wealth like a starving wolf. But gossip wasn't enough for me. This wasn't about whispers. It was about truth. And truth needed a stage. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and dust. I sat beside Michael, my attorney, hands folded neatly in my lap. Across from us sat Emily and Jason, their faces pale but defiant. Behind them, rows of benches filled with neighbors, friends, and curious strangers who had come to watch. The story had spread faster than I ever expected. When Judge Hamilton entered, the room hushed. He was a tall man with stern eyes, known for despising frivolous family disputes, but today was no ordinary case. "Court is now in session," he said, voice booming. "We are here to discuss the estate planning of Margaret Collins." Every eye turned to me. Jason's lawyer, a slick man with an oily smile, rose first. "Your Honor, my clients, Emily and Jason Hayes, are simply concerned for Mrs. Collins's well-being. They wish to ensure her estate is properly managed as she grows older. It is troubling, to say the least, that she has withheld financial information from her only daughter." Gasps rose from the benches. Someone muttered, "Withheld? She owes them nothing." I kept my face calm, though my hands trembled. Michael stood next. "Your Honor, my client has every right to manage her estate as she sees fit, but since the defendants have made accusations, perhaps it's best if Mrs. Collins herself clarifies." Judge Hamilton nodded. "Mrs. Collins, please proceed." I rose slowly, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. "For years," I began, "I was treated as a burden by the very people who should have loved me most. My daughter Emily locked me out of her home. My son-in-law, Jason, tried to manipulate me into signing over what they thought was my meager fortune. But they didn't know the truth." I held up the sealed envelope. "This is my will, and today I will reveal its contents." Michael opened the envelope with deliberate care, the wax cracking like thunder in the quiet room. He read aloud, "I, Margaret Collins, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. To my daughter, Emily Hayes, I leave $1. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Emily leapt to her feet. "What?" Michael continued over the noise. "To my son-in-law, Jason Hayes, I leave nothing." Not a cent. Jason's face turned crimson, his fists clenched. The whispers grew louder. "Nothing? $1. After everything, the remainder of my estate, including properties, investments, and liquid assets totaling over $6 million, shall be placed into a trust for my granddaughter, Lily Hayes, to be managed by independent trustees until she reaches the age of 25. The room went utterly silent. A woman in the back gasped, "$6 million. Another whispered, "She gave it all to the little girl." Someone else muttered, "That daughter will never recover from this humiliation." Emily's knees buckled, and she sank into her chair, pale as paper. Jason hissed something in her ear, but she shoved him away. The cracks in their perfect marriage were starting to show. Emily sobbed openly. "Mom, how could you? I'm your daughter, your only daughter." I looked at her, my eyes wet but firm. "A daughter is more than blood, Emily. A daughter is love, respect, care. You locked me out of your home, out of your life. But Lily, sweet, innocent Lily, She never turned her back on me. She deserves my protection. Not you. Gasps again. The judge himself raised an eyebrow, clearly moved. Jason finally snapped, slamming his hand on the table. This is outrageous. She's old. She doesn't know what she's doing. That will is a lie. Michael calmly slid forward a stack of documents. Your Honor, this will was prepared under my supervision. Mrs. Collins was examined by 2 independent doctors who verified her sound mind. Everything is legal and binding. The crowd broke into whispers again. They've lost everything. She's outsmarted them. Judge Hamilton banged his gavel. Order. I see no grounds to dispute this will. It is valid. Mrs. Collins's wishes will be upheld. Emily broke down completely, tears staining her designer blouse. Jason glared at her with pure venom, as though blaming her for losing the fortune. But justice wasn't finished yet. Michael leaned in and spoke again. Your Honor, one final matter. We have evidence, emails, text messages, even recordings, that Jason Hayes attempted to coerce Mrs. Collins into signing away her assets under false pretenses. We are filing charges of elder financial abuse. Gasps turned into a stunned roar. Jason's head whipped toward me. You set me up. I met his rage with calm steel. No, Jason. You set yourself up. I just finally gave you the rope to hang yourself. 2 officers stepped forward. Jason protested, shouting, but the handcuffs clicked. The courtroom erupted, half in shock, half in applause. Emily sat frozen, her world shattered. She looked at me with swollen eyes. Mom, please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Don't take Lily away from me. My heart ached. Despite everything, she was still my child. But the damage was too deep. I won't take Lily from you, I whispered, but I also won't let her grow up learning your kind of greed. That's why she'll be protected. By the trust. By love that doesn't ask for anything in return. Emily broke into fresh sobs. I turned to leave, the crowd parting silently around me. Some touched my arm, whispering, You did the right thing. Others simply nodded in respect. As I stepped out into the sunlight, clutching Lily's small hand, she had been brought to me quietly during the hearing, my chest swelled with relief. Justice had been delivered. The truth was out. Jason humiliated, facing charges, Emily exposed, broken by her own greed. But as I looked down at Lily's innocent face, one question haunted me. It's strange how life can both break and mend you at the same time. Months have passed since that day in the community hall, when I exposed Daniel and Claire's betrayal. The memory still lingers, as sharp as glass under bare feet. Their words, their shame, the crowd's gasps echoing in my ears. But the wound has begun to scar, no longer bleeding the way it once did. I moved out of that house soon after, not in shame, but in strength. I rented a small cottage near the edge of town, surrounded by lilac bushes and a garden that reminded me of my youth. For the first time in years, I lived not as a dependent mother, but as a woman who chose her own peace. At first, the silence was unbearable. No Daniel clattering around, no Claire slamming doors in irritation, just me and the hum of the refrigerator. But slowly, that silence became a companion. I learned to hear my own thoughts again, thoughts that weren't clouded by fear or betrayal. Daniel didn't come to see me after the confrontation, not once. Claire, from what I hear, filed for divorce a few months later. Debt piled higher than their love could withstand. Word reached me through neighbors that Daniel had moved into a small apartment, working odd jobs, drinking more than he should. When I pictured him alone, my heart ached despite everything. He was still my son, the boy who once brought me daisies from the garden. The boy I once held against my chest when fevers nearly took him, but I couldn't rescue him anymore. Love doesn't mean enabling destruction. Sometimes the kindest thing a mother can do is step back and let her child face the consequences of his own choices. That realization broke me all over again, but it also freed me. Evelyn became my anchor. She visited often, bringing me pies she baked, helping me plant herbs in the garden, laughing with me over tea. Sometimes she'd squeeze my hand and say, "You don't know how strong you are." But I did know, because strength isn't measured by how much you can carry. It's measured by how much you can let go. The community too surrounded me in ways I never expected. Women from church stopped by with groceries. A neighbor offered to mow my lawn. Even the children on my street would wave and call me Grandma Harper, though I wasn't related to them. Slowly, I realized, family is not always blood. Sometimes family is chosen. One evening, while watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and pink, I pulled out my old journal. I wrote about the incident, about Daniel's words that sliced me open. "She's worth more dead than alive." I wrote about how those words nearly destroyed me, but also about how they pushed me to finally stand up for myself. If he hadn't said them, maybe I would have continued living quietly in their shadows, slowly fading away. In a twisted way, his cruelty became my awakening. Nearly a year later, on a cold winter evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Daniel standing there. His face was thinner, older somehow, lines of regret etched deeply into his skin. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking, I don't deserve to be here." My chest tightened. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the hurt, all the betrayal surged back like a tide, but then I saw his eyes. Not cold, not greedy, but hollow, desperate, drowning. "Why are you here, Daniel?" I asked softly. Tears filled his eyes. "Because I've lost everything. Claire's gone. The debts nearly swallowed me whole. And every night I hear your voice, the way you said family is love, respect, and loyalty. And I realized I never gave you that. I just want to say I'm sorry." The words hung in the air, heavy and trembling. Did I forgive him? Not fully. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a road you walk, one step at a time. But in that moment, I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, and I let him step inside from the cold. Her hair was shorter, streaked with grey. She looked thinner, older, her beauty dimmed, not by time, but by regret. She stood there, hands trembling, eyes brimming with something I hadn't seen in years: humility. "Mom," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. I froze, pruning shears still in my hand. She stepped closer. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to see you." My heart pounded. This was the daughter who had locked me out, who had screamed that I owed her everything. And yet, beneath the weariness in her eyes, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees and ask for a kiss to make it better. "Emily," I said, my voice shaking. "Why now?" She looked down. "Because Lily talks about you all the time, and every time she does, I realize I don't even deserve to be her mother if I can't face the mother I abandoned." Tears blurred my vision. We sat inside, drinking tea in silence before she finally spoke again. "Mom, I was wrong. About everything. I thought money would keep me secure, that I was entitled to it after all you gave me growing up. But I was blind. Jason used me. I used you. And I can't take it back." Her voice cracked. For a long moment, I didn't answer. Then I whispered, "You hurt me more than I ever thought possible. But Emily, you're still my daughter." Her head shot up, eyes wide. Does that mean you forgive me? I paused. Forgiveness is not a door I can fling open in one moment. It's a window I can slowly slide open with time. If you're willing to keep knocking, maybe one day the window will stay open. She nodded, tears spilling freely. Later that evening, Lily came running inside, dripping wet from playing in the rain. She froze when she saw her mother sitting there. "Mom," she said, confused. Emily opened her arms, hesitant. "Sweetheart." Lily looked between us, her eyes full of innocence and wisdom far beyond her years. Then she walked slowly toward her mother and hugged her. My throat tightened. Children see what we adults forget. Love is always fragile, but always possible. As I rocked on my porch that night, watching the stars appear, I thought about everything: betrayal, humiliation, courtroom battles, wealth, forgiveness. And I realized something I want every person, young or old, to know. Wealth doesn't define legacy. Love does. Wealth can be stolen, squandered, fought over, but love, the kind that nurtures, forgives, and protects, that is the true inheritance we leave behind. If my story teaches anything, it's this: never underestimate the strength of those you dismiss, and never wait too long to love the people who raised you, because one day you might knock on a door and find no one left to answer. Emily and I are not healed, not fully, but we have started. Lily is the bridge between us, reminding us both that family, though broken, can still be mended if we're brave enough to try. So I share my story here, not just as a mother, not just as a grandmother, but as a woman who has lived through betrayal and chosen not to let it harden her heart completely. And I ask you, dear viewer, as you listen, if you were in my shoes, would you forgive? Or would you let the past stay locked outside forever?